on 93.9 KPDQ, a beautiful day here in the Rose City, and our program being sponsored by Day Chiropractic, and that means that Dr. David Day is here. Welcome!
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm looking forward to having you and hearing what you have to say today. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, we've come through a crazy summer, and for our listeners who heard us last time I was here, I had the whole band, Coyote Hill Bluegrass, and the
That's
Day
what I
Brothers.
heard.
It was really fantastic. And so, if you missed that pulled pork sandwich and that wonderful music, you really missed a great event. We had more people than we've ever had. The weather was amazing. It was just an incredible time. So we've pretty well recovered from that now. So so here's the fall, right?
Right.
And for those of you who have listened for a while, you know that I am the president of the Midway Business Association. And so this weekend, our signature event is sponsored by Division Midway Alliance, one of our members, is going to happen out in the Midway area. So if you're looking for something to do maybe after church, it will actually go from 11 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon this Sunday. And it's right out on Division Street, and it's at Duke's Country Bar sort of thing. It's on that parking lot. There's a whole complex there, and so we'll have a whole festival set up. So I'll be there all the time. We'll have a booth for our clinic, and we'll be there representing because our business association is one of the sponsors of that event. So we're real excited. If you wouldn't mind praying that the rain holds off just a little bit. I know we want the rain, and I'm really excited about rain, but if you could pray, the Lord would just not have it start till after 5. Okay, that's. So just make a note in your calendar. Just start praying for that. If you would, we want the rain for the for the dryness and things, but maybe if the Lord can just hold it off just a little bit, that would make our event go a lot better. Anyhow, so something that happened this weekend. I was at a wonderful chiropractic conference, and in fact, that conference and what that did in my thinking is going to be a lot of what we're going to talk about today.
Great.
Because it was just one of those riveting times. One of the speakers, Dr. Murphy, who came from down in California, he was giving a talk, and we all kind of understand that chiropractic helps the joints and we move better and things like that. So one of his points was he was saying, well, you know what? Those mechanoreceptors, it's actually the nerves that send information to the brain about kind of the position of our joints and our posture and all those things. And in fact, if we were to ask what percentage, if we look at the nerves in general, the information coming from the body, from these mechanoreceptors and things, is probably about 50% of the nerves. People would say, oh, it's got to be pain. Now, pain is less than 10%. Pain really isn't that important in the grand scheme of things neurologically.
Okay.
So you go, well, that's really weird. So he starts listing all these things about what these, how they interact, like it influences the amount of blood flow and energy production, muscle tone, viscera, that's your organs and things. It affects your immunity, your telomere length, and we'll probably talk about that in subsequent times here, but that's what they're looking at now is these telomeres. They're predictors as to your longevity. And there was a study, in fact, another one of the researchers gave a talk, and he said it hasn't been published, so they can't give the specifics on this exact study, but they're going to be able to show that chiropractic adjustments actually will help improve your telomere length and make your telomeres go longer. And you want long telomeres. They kind of predict that you're going to live longer. If you have short ones, it means you have things like cardiovascular disease and various problems. So you want longer telomeres, and that's when people talk about what your age, kind of your effective age or what your longevity potential is. When they measure the telomeres, now that gives them an idea. So it's kind of interesting. We'll talk about that later. But the thing that I want to start our show with today is the concept that I use to create. I'm going to create a special for this Festival of Nations. It's a $65 special, and we're calling it the I don't know what to call it, but when I made the commercial, it was about your nerve system being corked, because the speaker made it. So I'm sitting there, and he said that he says a subluxation of the upper cervical region can cork your nerve system, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, that is a really interesting way to describe what happened. And so that means when I give somebody an adjustment, I'm going to uncork their body, get that nerve flow going again. I'm going, I like that. So we actually have a picture here of a champagne bottle and the cork coming out. and it's like, so I've been just chuckling to myself. And I'm going to, as people hear the commercial and so forth, we're going to talk about this more in the clinic. But then what he did is he said he used the example that he used was that of the football player Jim McMahon. And so I went and I got an article that had been published this was in Newsday, and so I found this had originally been published in 2014. But what he said is this is a great way to start thinking about chiropractic and describing it to our patients and helping them think. So we're saying, okay, well, let's take, because we all remember Jim McMahon. He was a football player,
Oh,
right?
sure. What a great football player.
Yes, with the 85 Bears and things. And what has happened to him? So I thought, well, I'll go ahead and print this. So here's this thing, and the article is Long Island doctors help Jim McMahon get his life back, and they can help others too. So you go, who were these doctors? What did they do? What happened to Jim? How did he get his... To get his life back, that meant something must have happened to him. What has happened to him since his playing days? All right. So Jim McMahon had nearly given up hope, resigned to a lifetime of pain and frightening memory loss. He even considered giving up completely and taking his own life. Then a Long Island doctor helped him find a miracle. Before meeting Dr. Raymond Damadian of Woodbury, the pain in the 55-year-old former quarterback's head was so excruciating, the throbbing of every single heartbeat in his ears so persistent, that he mostly sought refuge in the bedroom of his home in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was the only way he could find any sort of relief, and even then, just laying in his bed with the lights off, he couldn't completely escape the pain. It got to the point where I couldn't get out of bed for weeks at a time, the former Super Bowl winning quarterback said. The acute memory loss was just as troublesome. On the occasion when McMahon did leave his home, he sometimes couldn't remember where he was. Sometimes he'd decide to go to the store to buy some chewing tobacco, but half an hour later he'd still be home because he'd forgotten why he wanted to go out. He had to carry a picture of him and his girlfriend with her telephone number in case he forgot who he was or where he needed to go. Now, how old is this guy? He's 55.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm thinking, in fact, right now, yesterday I had a lady, and whether she has Alzheimer's, she's an older patient, and let's say severe dementia. But something had happened last week when I adjusted. When she stood up, she started to cry. And she was crying. She said, I'm so happy. Well, yesterday, it happened again. She stands up after being adjusted and starts to cry. And she has this big smile. And you go, this poor lady has had dementia. She doesn't really remember who. Somebody has to bring her to my office. And you go, wait a minute. Something is happening. She's now been under care for maybe 2 months or 3 months. Something is happening inside of her brain that she started to feel happy again, and it's so foreign to her. So she's been kind of withering away in her brain, right? Can't remember anything, doesn't know who she is. All these things. Something must be uncorking, or something is happening, and I can't wait till next week. I'll see her again. I'm going to adjust her again. And it's like, oh my goodness. So you may be sitting at home, right? And something has gone wrong inside of you. And for Jim, he was hearing the pounding of his heartbeat. He was hearing it in his ear. It was driving him nuts. He had to turn off the lights. He had to lay still. Couldn't, so this was what his life was like. I'd be driving down the road trying to get home, and I wouldn't know where I was at. He said, I called my girlfriend and told her I didn't know where I was. She said, well, what are you driving past? I said, well, I just saw the casino, and I know I'm supposed to go past that to get home. I just couldn't get home. There were thoughts of suicide, he said, especially the times when he flashed back to his last meeting with former Bears teammate Dave Durson, who died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound on February 17, 2011. So I think about the people like these PTSD, these servicemen and women who come back from combat. I'm wondering, is this message that we're going to talk about, this whole uncorking thing, is that something that people need to hear about? And I think, wait a minute, maybe they don't need a shrink, maybe they don't need these strong medications. Maybe what they need is someone to look, and as we're going to find out, probably at their neck, okay? But I was with him for a month before he killed himself, McMahon said. He said, Max, sometimes I'm driving around and I don't know where I'm at. I told him, I do that too. I started having suicidal feelings myself. If I had had a gun, I might be dead. So kind of read, this
Sure.
has gotten, he's kind of down in a pretty big doldrums. Well, McMahon didn't take his own life, but he was resigned to spending the rest of his days in declining health. Another sad example of the after effects of the multiple concussions he suffered during his 15-year career, which ended with the 1996 season. A cover story in Sports Illustrated 2 years ago chronicling his health problems brought McMahon's situation into focus and drew further attention to the league's concussion crisis. So one of the other speakers at my conference was someone who's developing a whole program around this, what they're calling concussion roulette. And that is, if you have one concussion, what are the odds of another one, or the ramifications then following a concussion? It's remarkably devastating for a lot of people. But back then, we weren't given much thought or attention to it, and so we'll kind of talk about it as we go through this, and you'll see how different it is there. but it brought further attention to the league's concussion crisis. So this is a problem right now the NFL is having to deal with. But he once had been an electrifying personality on the Bears' unforgettable 1985 Super Bowl champion team, but now he was reduced to chronic pain, forgetfulness, and suicidal thoughts, a familiar pattern for so many. But then help. But his haunting story ultimately turned into a life-changing moment for McMahon, thanks to two Long Island residents who had a hunch that McMahon's problems could be traceable not only to numerous concussions, but also problems with his neck.
Wow.
As it turns out, meeting his brother-in-law, Dave Terry of East Cork, or wherever it is, not only may have saved McMahon's life and alleviated much of the suffering, but ultimately could help other former players dealing with similar situations. I read the article 2 years ago, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't know he was having a problem, said Terry. And these guys had developed an MRI, one of the first MRIs back in the 1980s. I met Jim at a golf tournament 7 years ago. I really got a kick out of him. My brother-in-law was starting new science, and I thought maybe we could help. Well, so they ended up calling Jim. And they said Jim's principal problems were headaches and loss of memory. And I asked if he'd ever had an MRI. Well, he said yes. And I asked what part of his anatomy was scanned. And he said his head. Okay? So, and this is something that I'll tell you. Just yesterday, I had somebody who'd been in a car accident. And as we were going through the history, she'd been to the hospital. And she'd had x-rays.
Right.
Okay. Oh, good. So we send away to the for the hospital records, and yes, she had x-rays, but they had taken chest x-rays. And I'm looking, what about the rest of her? Right? So she didn't realize as far as she had known, x-rays had been taken and she was fine. So Jim, the same thing happened to him. They had taken MRIs, but where had they been focusing? On his head, right? Because the concussions. What was happening is they were looking at the brain. And we'll talk about the article, because the crazy thing is Jim has already agreed to donate his brain to science because of this experience and what's happening with these athletes and things as they try to get to that. So anyhow,
this is awesome.
Isn't this crazy? Well, in anyone who's been through anything that's complicated, often you have seen lots of doctors or you've had lots of tests. And when you get to the point you feel like everything's been tested, or I've had the MRIs, or I've had and I have to sometimes sit down and say, now wait a minute here, let me think like a medical doctor, or let me think like, if all they're worried about is maybe you have like a concussion, they're going to look at your brain. Nobody had done any looking at his neck. And it was really, and so it's amazing as we see this unfold. So this doctor took a closer look at his neck and found that the top two vertebrae were misaligned, which caused a blockage of his cerebral spinal fluid. So now you start seeing this corking idea.
Right.
Wait a minute. If you have a misalignment of the neck, for instance, and it chokes off that CSF, what would that do to you? And the CSF, the cerebral spinal fluid, is what sends all the nutrients, and it flushes everything. That's kind of the circulation system for your brain. And if it's all congested and not allowing that to flow, oh my goodness, we need to restore that. And it's so interesting. So if it gets obstructed and backs up, the symptoms of pressure, numbness, loss of vision, and ultimately people end up in wheelchairs. Anyhow, McMahon said he was never told about any neck problems, believing that the post-NFL issues were solely concussion related.
All right, let's
stop. Okay,
let's stop.
All right,
because I am real excited to find out what happened when they actually looked at his spine and his neck, and what they found. Let me give out our phone number if you want to call us up. You have a question about chiropractic care. Dr. David Day is here. He uses a whole person approach, more than chiropractic care, corrective exercises, lifestyle advice, nutritional counseling. Dr. Day is here for you as a resource here on the Northwest Showcase. Our phone number in Portland, 786-9390. 503-786-9390. And if you're outside of the Rose City on this beautiful day, 800-845-2162. Love to chat with you here on 93.9 KPDQ.